The gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Cruz, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you so much for holding this important hearing to combat the economic threat from China. And I would sincerely like to thank all of the witnesses for being here. I know this is an all-day event, but your insight is very valuable to us. You know, today we're seeing heightened Chinese aggression on multiple fronts. And we just saw this week alone the Chinese balloon, which we've spoken about several times. It's critical that the Committee on Financial Services that were mobilized in our financial and oversight tools to address the China challenges. Later this month, I'm planning to introduce a bill to direct the Comptroller General of the United States to study the illicit financing associated with synthetic drug trafficking. As you know, I'm on the border in deep South Texas, so drug trafficking and China's involvement is very important to myself and to my district. You know, this study will outlay for Congress the business model that organizations are carrying out with the trafficking and how they move and hide illicit gains, and what the U.S. government can do better when it comes to fentanyl money laundering. So again, this is something near and dear and impactful for our district. So I'd like to ask you all if you all have any kind of clarity on the ties between the Mexican cartels and the Chinese Communist Party. If you've seen any ties, distinct ties, or know of any ties.
I'm happy to take the first cut at that question. It's obviously a very, very important one. And I know that starting really in 2017 during the Trump administration, the Treasury Department began looking very earnestly at illicit fentanyl trafficking generally, but specifically those networks and their touch points with jurisdictions, including China. In terms of specific ties, we have seen publicly reported information from the Treasury Department, as I was discussing with a colleague of yours, about Chinese companies that are making precursors to fentanyl and shipping those fentanyl products to Mexico, which are then finding their way across the border into the United States. So there is some limited information that's been public. With that being said, I do think a study commissioned to further explore that information is, the goal of getting that, I think, is a worthwhile endeavor. The other point I will make on it as well, and this is a conversation I was having with one of your colleagues, it's very important to have the relevant regulatory authorities in the United States publish as much information that is digestible by the private sector as they can in order to arm the private sector with that information to detect, disrupt, and deter such activity. So FinCEN, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network at the Treasury Department, has done a really good job over the last few years of publishing in-depth guidance documents that are meant to tell financial institutions, this is the type of activity we're concerned about. This is the type of activity that you should focus on as financial institutions. And I think that's made a real impact. This would seem, if it's a priority, it seems like it absolutely is, to be a good candidate for that type of activity as well.
So what I'm hearing is that the GAO should make a first step in actually trying to find the flow of the money and stop the flow of the drugs and people across our borders. So a study, you feel, will be beneficial to the House?
I think that's right. I also do think that it would be very important to have Treasury work, not collaboratively, but sort of in parallel tracked, because I think that the Treasury Department will have access to additional information that the GAO may not have access to, which could be useful in providing information to the private sector to help disrupt and deter.
Thank you. I yield back.